Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is David, and today I'm going to conclude my top 25 board game countdown. I made 3 previous videos where I did 5 at a time, and then a bonus game in each of them. And with the scarcity at which I'm able to make videos at the present time, I figured I would just make one slightly longer version and try to hit all 10 of the top ones with 2 bonus games that are kind of connected to each other in what they provide for the playing experience. So I'm going to start with the 2 bonus games. You can see there's some pretty clear holes back behind me in the collection, so I've got a lot of titles to talk about here. And they're all excellent games. So the first bonus game I'm going to talk about is my wife's favorite designer is a person called Uwe Rosenberg, and he's most popular, most famous for games such as Agricola, Caverna, A Feast for Odin, those games. And my favorite game from him is one of his oldest ones. This is called Ora et Labora, which is work and labor, or work and prayer, or something like that. And in this, you are building. You get cards that you can buy and build into your little community. You've got a board where you put things adjacent and they'll score bonuses. And there are certain special buildings that if they're next to buildings, they'll score their extra points on there. And all the buildings that you're building give actions that you can place workers on. So you each turn you are placing one of your 3 workers out, or if all 3 of your workers are already out, you get all 3 of them back and then can put them out, put one of them out. And one of the most interesting things about this is there's a resource wheel in the game, and it's also your game tracker. So after everybody's had a turn each round, the wheel's going to move 1 notch. And so every time it's moving, it'll be moving away from where the resources are. There's numbers on each of these spots, and so that is how many. Based here on the inner wheel, there's numbers there, and that's how many of that resource are available to a player to use. And when a player takes that resource goes from there all the way up to where the wheel is, to where the bar is, making it worth 0 at that point in time. So it'll be a couple more turns before there's anything of substance for that particular resource. So you're trying to vie against your other players to get those resources that you need before somebody else takes them and they're gone, while also trying to build the cards, to use the cards that you need to expand your little township that you are putting together. Some of the cards can only be adjacent to specific cards of a type. Others get bonus points if they're by certain cards. Others don't care where they're at, but they have to be built on a specific terrain type, such as forest. There are woods and other things that you have to kind of take an action to clear out, but they'll give you some resources when you do so. And it's a really clever, thinky game. It's got 2 different game modes in here. So it's got a France and an Ireland version, each coming with different sets of cards that do different things. So that's one of the things that I really like about it, is that it's got multiple modes in there, and it's just got a lot of clever thinkiness that you're trying to manage with that game. And so the other bonus one that kind of goes along with it is a game by the same designer called Glass Road. So this one is a much shorter game. This is probably in the hour at most length. But this one also has wheels, but each player has their own wheels. So as you're as you're spending resources, the resources are moving around, and the wheel will be moving at certain times based on if you have a gap where everything is over a 0 quantity, the wheel will turn to catch up with them. So it'll make the ones that are further ahead worth more, but it might make the ones that are further behind worth less. And so managing the two wheels of resources is an essential aspect of it. And again, you've got a little town area that you're going to be putting buildings onto. But the key thing with this one is everybody's got a hand of cards, a hand of action cards. Everybody's got the same action cards, and each turn you're going to choose a couple of them to play out, and people will go around revealing one at a time and then executing that action. But anybody else that has chosen that same action will also take that same action at the same time, and everybody will have a weaker version of that if other people are sharing in that action. But it's important because you're going to be picking 5 of the action cards for the round, but you'll only be able to choose 3 of them during your turns. So you need to try to pick at least 2 that you think other people are going to be playing so that you can play all 5 of them, even if for weaker actions, because you can follow along with 2 of them. And so it's got a lot of little clever interactions there with trying to not only pick what you know that you need to do as a player, but also what you think your opponents might be doing and going for, so that you can maximize the number of actions that you're able to take to manipulate the resources on your wheel to be able to buy buildings and build them into your community, to clear out the sand and the water and the forests and things like that to gain resources and all of that. And it's a really, really clever design. I wish my wife liked this one more than she does. She thinks it's fine, but I'm the one that's a big fan of it. And I love Glass Road. I need to play that one more often because it is just such a clever game. So now we get to the top 10 itself. And we're going to start with the smallest game that I've got pulled. And it is one of the smallest games that I've talked about. And that is this little game, Hanami Koji. This is a wonderful game. It has only a couple of cards in it. So it's got these big geisha cards that you'll lay out in a row. And there's 3 2s, 2 3s, a 4, and a 5. And that's the same distribution of cards that are in the actual deck. So there's going to be 2 of each of these 2s, 3 of both of the 3s, 4 4s, and 5 5s in the deck. So each round, you'll shuffle those together. You will remove one without knowing what it is. And then you'll deal both players. This is only for 2 players. The cards. And so you don't know what your opponent has. You don't know what card has been removed, and you will draw 6 of them. And from there, you have to start making decisions. Each round, you have exactly 4 actions that you can take. Both players will take those same 4 actions in whichever order they prefer. The actions are to take 1 card so at the start of your turn, you'll always draw 1 of your cards. So you will see all of your cards eventually, but you're making decisions early on, not knowing what else you're going to be getting. So one of your actions is to save 1 card. Face down, it's set aside. Only you will know what it is. Your opponent won't see what that card is, but at the end of the round, you will be able to put it out. The second action that you can take is to discard 2 cards face down. So it removes them from the round. Your opponent doesn't know what they are. Only you know what they are. So again, more information your opponent doesn't know. Your third action is take 3 cards from your hand. Put them face up. Your opponent chooses 1 to take and play on their side. You get the other 2 to play on your side. And then the fourth action is you're going to make 2 pairs of cards. So 2 cards, 2 groups of 2. Your opponent's going to choose one of those groups and put them on their side. And you will take the other 2 and put them on your side. So both players are going to take those same 4 actions with their cards. But what you're trying to do is to have the majority of cards on a geisha. So, for instance, one of those 3s, you need to have at least 2 of the 3 cards on your side, unless 2 of them get tossed out over the course of the round, in order to win the favor of that geisha over to your side. With 7 geishas out there in the row, you need to win 4 of them before your opponent does. And so it becomes a really thinky, difficult decision of what cards to put out in the offerings, when to do each of those actions, because each one's going to happen just once for you during a round. The other way you can win is if you have 11 points worth of geisha favors. So getting that 5 and a 4 and a 2, even though you wouldn't have 4 of them, you would have 11 points worth. So there's that other alternative way of winning. If nobody wins at the end of the first round, you deal out the cards, you leave the favor tokens where they are, meaning that you start the next round with some of them already on your side. Your opponent needs to try to not only win enough to get however many they need to win, but they also need to prevent you from pulling back ones that they've already secured. And so that's part of what makes this such a brilliant game. It plays in 15 to 20 minutes per game, and it is one that I will always, always, always be happy to play. The fact that it's number 10 is not in any way a demeaning thing towards it. Every one of these games in my top 10, barring the number 1 game, essentially, could change at any point in time. In fact, if I were to reorder them today versus how I did it in July, they'd probably change a little bit in their order. But I'm keeping the order how I had it in July. It's not, the game's fault that it took me until the end of September to get through the rest of them. Number 9, one of my bigger boxes here. This is Rococo. This is about making dresses and suits. When I heard of the theme, I thought this was going to be the dumbest game in the world. And then I played it, and I fell in love. So, you are gathering bolts of cloth and yarn and things like that to be able to make dresses. And how you're doing this is you have a hand of cards. Everybody starts with the same ones that enable you to take different actions. And so each round you're going to be taking 3 actions from the cards, and you're going to get to choose which ones that you want to take from those cards. But once you've used it, it goes into your discard, and so you can't get it back until you've gone through all of the cards and need to draw more than what you have left in your deck, at which point in time you will then take all of them and flip them back over, and then you freely choose. Each round there are going to be a couple more people that you can purchase that would then go into your hand that you can then use that same round, and then will go into your discard pile to come back later and be able to use them, and their powers get significantly stronger as you go. And basically, you are trying to buy varying bolts of cloth to be able to use them to make dresses that come up and are available that need specific materials, so specific colors of fabric, as well as some of the other additional items to be able to make them, to put them out onto all of these little rooms where they have differing spaces. And there were points for the dresses. Having the most in each of those areas is worth extra points. There are different decorations that you can do special actions to mark those decorations, which will get you bonus points at the end. There's a fireworks display, which can give you multipliers if you have fireworks marked, but they cost a lot of money, and money's kind of tight at times in the game, especially very early on. There are master cards, which have a gold thimble on them, which are kind of hard to come by and are your most lucrative because they can do just about anything. And there are certain dresses that can only be built by that master builder, and there are some spaces on here that can only have a dress or a suit placed on them that was made by a master builder, and so they will give you usually some kind of an additional thing back in return for taking them. And the different cards that you have in your deck come in 3 different varieties. You have an apprentice, a craftsman, and a master. I don't remember the exact names, but there's 3 tiers of them. And the apprentice one obviously can do fewer action options when you play that card. And each of those cards can be used for anything that is eligible for that type. So they're tier ranking, and they typically give you some additional bonus or a discount or something else that you use while doing that action. So you're trying to not only maximize the cards that are going into your deck. It's not a lot of cards go into there. I think you have like 11 is considered a pretty big deck at the end of the game. So you're not managing a whole lot because you're having to pay to buy and use an action to buy these cards. So You don't want to just do it freely and overlook everything else, because you're going to get a lot more points by getting stuff out on the board. But in order to do that most effectively, you do need to buy some of them. And that's what I love about Rococo, is it is a perfect blend of one of my favorite things in the game, which is deck building, along with the gathering resources, turning them into earned points, and to create certain things in order to maximize what you're able to do with your efficiency engine that you're putting together with your deck. So that is number 8, Rococo. Or number 9, Rococo. Number 8 is not in a box that tells you what it is, because I've got a ton of them in here. What this is, though, is a Lord of the Rings card game. So this is tons and tons of cards in here. I've got a binder full of the player cards, and then each there are little sets that come out that give you encounters. So they give you quests that you have to go through and complete certain tasks in order to advance along the storyline. And there are anywhere from 1 to 3 typically story cards that you have to go through, and each different story that you're going against has its own deck that it comes with, so it has its own unique cards, but it's also typically constructed of multiple other sets of cards that go into there. Let's see if I can find a good example of that. So for instance, one of the Hobbit packs here. So it's this quest is called "We Must Away Ere Break of Day." And so it tells you on the very first quest card, 1A, that you need these 2 card symbols to build the deck. And so the main set here has the goblin face, but you also shuffle in with this other set icon that came in the pack. And so they mix together. And so some of them will reuse cards that you'll see across maybe a couple different quests that will give you various goblins or other encounters that you're trying to overcome with your party of 3 heroes along the way. And for a long time, this was probably my number 2 game. It is one that I've played primarily solo because it is an excellent solo experience. A lot of people like playing it solo, where they run 2 different groups of 3 characters, each with their own deck, and being able to give themselves more options, more synergy, take more punishment. The game does have scaling things, because it'll have effects that will be, X based on the number of players. And so before you even start the game, you sit down and you make your deck of 50 cards for your hero characters. And they can be all sorts of people. You can have Gandalf, you can have Aragorn, you can have Legolas and Gimli, you can have the Hobbits, Merry, Pippin, Frodo, Sam. So they have various heroes, and you can have 3 of them, and each hero has threat on them. And so that is the value that's added to your threat tracker. And so you have a dial there that if you get to 50, you end the game automatically. And enemies will have a number on there, and that's the number that if your threat is at least at that number or higher, they will come and engage with you, whether you want them to or not, because you're posing enough of a threat to the big baddies that they notice you and they come after you. But if you're below that, then you aren't really a top priority, or maybe you haven't been noticed yet, and so they kind of ignore you unless you go and rush at them. And so you're trying to manage whatever bad guys come out throughout the deck as you're going through, along with there are locations that you have to go through that will require you to send enough people questing to overcome their value. And questing is an important part of it. So at the very beginning of the round, you're sending people out to the quest after you play some cards. And those people get turned sideways, and so they contribute their willpower to the questing. You have to surpass the so locations and enemies all have kind of a threat value on them. that you have to send more questing than the sum of all of those that are currently out and unengaged, so nobody's addressing them currently, in order to quest successfully. And as you quest successfully, your extra quest goes onto the main card if there's no current location that you're traveling through. And so once you have enough on there, you're able to fulfill what it says on there and then go on to the next card. And so you need to balance sending people out early to quest, but after you send them questing, you draw a card from the top of the deck per player, and so that also gets added to that threat. So you don't even know for sure what value you need, because that can go up by quite a bit. There are some cards that can add even more cards than what you expected to come out. And all of those people that you turn sideways to go questing, well, after all of that happens, you have some combat, and anybody that was used to go questing can't be used to fight or defend. And so you're trying to manage these resources between your 3 heroes and all of the allies that you put into your deck that hopefully you're able to get out and play, and some different things that you're able to do. And I love games that reward players for sitting down and taking time to build and construct a deck that works well in the face of whatever might be thrown at you. And that's why I love the Lord of the Rings card game. That's why I love games like Android Netrunner, which was previously featured in here. And there are so many other card games to where you're not just relying on dumb luck or what the game randomly gives you, but you're taking time and putting thought in ahead of time on, okay, this is how I want this to kind of work because these cards go well together, and it can kind of handle a range of things that might get thrown at me. So that was my number 8. So number 7. We've seen one game from this series already. And so this is Paladins of the West Kingdom. So we talked about Architects of the West Kingdom earlier. I've played and enjoyed Viscounts of the West Kingdom. I did that after this list was created. And so in this game, you are basically, it's what's called a worker placement game. So you're getting workers each round that you're placing out to do various actions. And most of those actions are on your own unique player board, where you have varying actions where you can work on constructing walls for defense, where you can work on converting the heathens out there to your religion, where you can work on going and fighting those barbarians, where you can go and work on just building up the town to make it a more lucrative town. You can send out your cloisters of monks out in the world to gain benefits and things like that. And so each round you're choosing a paladin, so you'll draw 3 paladins from your little paladin deck. You will choose one to play, one to put back on top of your deck, one to put at the bottom of your deck. That paladin has on there some power in 2 of the 3 types of categories. So there are 3 different traits that you're kind of tracking and that you're gaining in over the course of the game. The paladin of the round will boost 2 of those, one usually by 2 or 3, and the other by 1 or 2. And they also will give you 2 specific workers. And so workers come in different colors. So you will take those 2 workers, and then each round there will be cards that get flipped up that will have 4 workers on them. And in player order, people will choose one of them, take the workers of that color, then the next person chooses from the ones remaining until the last person has only 2 to choose from, and they'll take the workers. And so between those 6 workers, whatever you held over from the last round, you can keep up to 3 of them round to round. There are actions that you can take and different things that you can unlock that might get you more workers throughout the round. There are town people that you can recruit to help in your city. There's just so many things going on. There's lots of layers in here, and that's one of the things I love about it, is that it is a worker placement, but it's not based on simply being able to send your worker out to go do whatever action it is that you want. You have to, in some instances, get specific colors on a certain spot. So some of the ones on your player board require 3 workers, and it might be a black, one of any color, and a blue. And so you need to make sure that you're choosing, well, I want to do this action, so I need to make sure I have something that gives me a black and a blue for sure, so that I can be able to go and take this action that I want. And that's so much of the cleverness of this game. It is a long game, it's a thinky game, and I absolutely love it. So that is Paladins of the West Kingdom. Easily my favorite of the West Kingdom games, of the North Sea games, all of the games that this designer has published. That is hands down my absolute favorite of his. So number 6, we have a solo only game. So this one you can only play with yourself. And this is called Charlemagne, Master of Europe. I would show you the back, but it doesn't really show you anything about the game. And this is by a little publisher known as Hollandspiel. Hollandspiel makes little games. They're a small, independent kind of publisher. They come with little paper maps, so I'll show you this nice, lovely little map here. So you've got the map of Europe, and you've got different colored territories. And what you're trying to do is you are trying to gain enough points and to survive long enough to make it through turn 12 intact. And each round there is a losing condition that you have to meet. So you have to have a certain number of points each round. You have to have enough of an army to be able to survive the round. So you need to manage multiple different things. So you've got all kinds of little charts that you're kind of tracking. You're tracking your income, you're tracking your forces. You've got a little map where you actually fight out battles against barbarians. And what is clever about this game and the whole series, they've got 3 games of the series, the latest one being Aurelian, Restorer of the World, the first one being Agricola, Master of Britain. And those 3 games, what they feature, so you've got your map, you've got your armies that you're kind of moving around, and they aren't massive, and they're usually represented by a single token for each of your little armies that you're moving around. You're trying to manage things, but every action that you do has a reaction. So whether it's movement, whether it's doing battle, whether it's laying siege to things, after each action, there's a specific reaction that's referenced on their little cheat sheet. And there are 3 little cups where you have these little markers. So they come with little markers called chits. I'm going to grab one out of Aurelian here. So they've got little chits. And so there's 3 chits. There's a friendly cup, there's a neutral cup, kind of, and then there's a hostile cup. And so the different actions that you take might move things from the neutral cup and move them into the hostile cup, representing that what you're doing is making some people angry. So they're less inclined to be in your favor. And so they might rise up in rebellion, or they might lead a revolt against you, or barbarian forces might come and try to invade you, or the Moors might be coming across and getting in your face if you're Charlemagne. And the Vikings might be coming and pillaging certain areas of your map. And so all of those things are abstracted into these chits, and you're moving them from one cup to another based off of each action that you're doing. And at the end of each action, it'll also tell you how many you need to draw out of that cup. And so you'll draw them one at a time, blindly out of the cup, and then put them on the map wherever they get pulled. So as you're moving the forces over, you're going to have things that are coming out, and they become a big problem. They start stacking up, and you've got to try to get there quickly to deal with them before things get out of hand. Because there's also instant lose conditions along the way. There's a lot of ways to lose the game. There's only one path to actually winning the game. I am yet to win in any of the 3 versions of it, but I've come close in 2 of them. But in the hostile cup, there's a certain number of game turn chits as well, or not game turn, turn end chits. So a turn comes to an end when a certain number of these get drawn and you move along. And so things will happen in between rounds, usually adding even more things out there onto the map. It also determines when you check to see whether you've won or lost instantly. And so you could find yourself in a really bad situation where all of a sudden it ended far sooner than what you expected things to do. And well, now I've lost because, well, there were 30 chits in this cup and I happened to draw the 3 turn ends within the first 5 draws. and I was able to do absolutely nothing. And there's ways to uh, you always feel like you're in control to an extent because you're doing things, you're able to make moves freely along there within the parameters of the game, and you know what's going to happen as a result. You just don't know what's going to come out, and something that might seem like it's under control and I can ignore this right now might quickly rage into a, oh my gosh, things are burning down over there. I need to get over there and deal with it now before it goes even worse kind of situations. And I absolutely love them. I love all three games in the series. I need to get Agricola, Master of Britain. Um, yeah, I can't recommend that series strongly enough. If you're in a situation where you don't have people to play board games with, if you like historical flavored games, uh, strongly recommend those games. So let's get into the top 5 and try to go a little quicker here because I don't want this to go for an obscene amount of time. So number 5, we have Lizboa by Vital Lacerda. This game is magnificent. So you are rebuilding the city of Lisbon, which went through the unfortunate circumstance of being hit by a earthquake, flooding, and fires, all within a very short period of time, and it basically wiped out the city of Lisbon. And so this is you're replicating the efforts of 2 master builders. They were competitive builders. They're abstracted here as a green builder and a blue builder. And you're kind of working with the nobles of the city to help reconstruct the city. And so you've got cards that you're playing. You play 1 each round, and you can play it either to your player board area to gain a benefit of the card that you are tucking under onto your player board, and also exposes a permanent benefit, whether it's gaining more influence every time influence is gained, or giving you a discount on certain things, making certain actions more lucrative. Or you can play it up here to the court, to the specific noble, in order to go and trade favors with them and be able to take specific actions. So each of them gives you access to 1 main action and then 2 sub actions that you'll get to choose from. And there are so many layers in this game. It would take me an hour to just talk about all the things that you can do in there. But ultimately, you're trying to all rebuild the city of Lisbon. It's got different streets, so you're trying to rebuild shops. You're trying to put out construction plans for the builders to get extra points for certain types of cities out there. You're trying to clear away the debris and the rubble from all of the damage to get more points. You're trying to fulfill king's decrees to get you extra points, and it's magnificent. It is arguably the most difficult game on my top 25 list. It is not for the faint of heart. It will melt your brain when you try to learn it. There's a lot going on here, and this designer is infamous for having games that are designed in that same way, where there's so many things going on that you've got to try to keep track of, that it becomes very difficult to see how to get from point A to point B, because you say, okay, well, I need to do this in order to get points. But in order to do that, I need to go here and do this, and then I need to go here and do that, which lets me have the things I need to go here and fulfill this, which then will open it up to where I can finally go over here and do the thing that will get me points. So it's like you got to have a 30-minute plan just to figure out how to go and make 10 points. And I love that because everything's also interconnected in a very thematic and rich and rewarding manner. But again, it's not for the faint of heart, because it's going to be a challenge. You're going to feel like I don't understand what I'm doing for half of the game. And then once it finally clicks, you're going to be like, aha, okay, so now I understand. If I go here and I do this, then I can start getting on track to do all of these things that I want to do. Number 4 is the newest appearance on this list. And that is Pax Renaissance. This is the 2nd edition of Pax Renaissance. I've never played the 1st edition. I had played it just twice, I think, before making this list. I played it a couple other times since then, and it very much deserves its ranking here in the top because it is a masterpiece. So this game, you are in the Renaissance, and you are trying to vie for influence on the landscape of things. So there's a map out here that of Europe where you're going to have different chess pieces. So it's going to have knights and rooks and pawns that get placed onto the map of 3 different colors representing the different religious factions that were prominent at the time, trying to vie for control of areas. You're placing your little colored pawns out there between areas to gain influence. There's a market of cards that to buy the card that's the third one down, you have to put money on each card along the way to be able to buy that, and then they'll slide down. And so there's a revolving market of cards. And so there are comets that are in that deck. There's 2 different decks there, and each deck has 2 comets in it. And every time somebody buys a comet, they can activate one of the 4 end game conditions. So at the start of the game, there's no way to win the game. Somebody has to buy a comet, and then they can choose which of the 4 they want to put into play for the moment. So you could have a game where you have one of them come into play. You could see where all 4 of them come into play. You could have a game where none of them come into play, because if the 2 markets get wiped out and no longer have any cards to draw from, then the game will automatically end, and there's a unique win condition that you check for that. And cards are so either east or west, and so they'll go onto one side or other of your board. One of the things that you can do is you can activate an ability on each card of one of those sides. So buying and playing these cards is important because then it'll let you do more actions the more that you have. Money is extremely tight. You can run trade routes, which will let you track through along a path on the map. Depending on whether it's east or west, you take the money that has been pooled on the first card in the pile there, and it will pay out to each pawn that's along that path until it reaches its end. There's just so many layers of things going on. It's got clever card interactions. It's got area control with the map. It's got really, really clever things going on that it's going to take multiple plays to feel like you even understand it. Each deck is about this thick, and you use about this many of the cards in each deck every time you play. So every time you sit down to play this, it's going to feel completely different. Strategies are going to be viable that weren't in previous games just based on the cards that are coming out and when they come out. And I absolutely love it. Number 3 is a series of games. I'm grabbing the ones that I own of it. So there's a lot of games in this series. And this series is called the Great Battles of History series. So you can see here, Great Battles of History. So this particular one is volume 8. I know I've got at least a volume 11 here. There's a lot of them. And these take place primarily in the ancient world, although there are some exceptions with some feudal Japan. There's one that takes place in the 1600s, but most of them take place in the ancient world. And they have multiple battles inside here. And so each battle is going to have its own map. In each scenario, you're going to have 2 armies, and they have their forces with their little counters that are going to have attack and defense and their movement values. And you're going to have a certain value that you have to eliminate of your opponent by the end of a round before they eliminate a specific value from your side of the army by the end of a round. And so you've got different army types. You've got phalanxes, you've got horsemen, you've got javelins, you've got archers, you've got just heavy infantry that you can march out there and just clash these armies together to recreate a historical battle. And it is a long game on most of these. I'm in the middle of playing one with a friend we meet most Thursdays, and we are just about on to this Thursday. We'll be doing session 3 of finishing a battle. I think we're about 20-30 minutes away from finishing that battle. But I think we're planning on just playing nothing but these games throughout all of October as well. And so each of these has Well, I've got some that have only like 2 scenarios, but each scenario is supposed to be like 6 to 8 hours to play, so you've got a lot of play time in them. But some of them, this one's got quite a few scenarios. My friend has one called SPQR, which is a deluxe version of the SPQR, and it's got, I think, like 18 different battles in it. There's a magazine that gets released every year by the same, it's not by the same company, but it's uh, kind of partners with the game company GMT Games. And this magazine's called C3I. And most of them come with some sort of new scenarios and some new counters to go with one of their games in the series. They've got a couple that are on pre-order right now for a release at a discounted rate when they get printed and come back out, or come out for the first time. And it's just, it's wonderful. It's got layers and layers of strategy. I feel like in the next 5 years, maybe I can promote myself to being an armchair general, just based off of finally getting a little bit of better as I'm going through and doing these scenarios. So the Great Battles of History series is my number 3. And that leads into something very similar for my number 2. It's another war series, and this is the Men of Iron series. So this is 4 games. I've got all 4 of them here. So the most recent one is Arquebus, which is battles for northern Italy in 1495 through 1544. And this is the one I've played the most because it's the first one I had. And again, it's very similar. You're going to have a map, you're going to have counters, and these are all set kind of in the Middle Ages, the medieval period. But I've got a tri-pack here that just came out last year that has the first 3 games in the series: Men of Iron, Infidel, Blood and Roses. So Men of Iron is just, it was what kicked off the series, so it's got an assortment of medieval times. Infidel revolves around the Crusades, and it's so much fun to have something revolving around Crusades. And then Blood and Roses is about the War of the Roses. And so there's all kinds of ones in here. This is a little easier than the Great Battles of History. There's a lot fewer little nuances and distinctions to worry about. The battle and conflict is a little more straightforward, and what you can do in the game is a little more straightforward, so it makes it a little more streamlined, which is probably why it's a little bit higher on my list. And I love medieval period a little bit more. But yeah, that's my number 2. And I mean, flip a coin, the number 2, number 3, those could change any given day. I love them both. But that leads me to my number 1. This has been my number 1, I think, since the day I played it. I have owned this game for most of the time that I have collected board games. I heard about it. I said I need to get this game. It was out of print. I didn't know what out of print was at the time in board games. I got a copy, I think, for $100 on eBay, and I've had it ever since. That is War of the Ring. So this monstrosity here is another war game. It's a war game before I even knew what a war game was. And this is based on Lord of the Rings. So you've got your map of Middle Earth here. Try to hold this in a way that I can actually be in here and see what I'm talking about. And so you've got your little figures for your fellowship and for some of the key figures on the shadow side. And then you've got red figures for the shadow armies and blue one for all of the free people's armies. And so each of they're divided into different nations. So the shadow armies got 3 different nations. They've got Isengard, they've got the Southern and Easterlings, and then they've got the Mordor armies. And then the free peoples have, like, I think 5 or 6 different armies that are sparse throughout this map. And when you first set it up and you look at it, you say, there's no way. I mean, it's a lot of red compared to the blue. And most of the blue armies are 1 or 2 people in each spot. And so each side has 2 different ways to win the game. Both sides are able to win a military victory. So the shadow side wins if it captures 10 points worth of locations. So locations are worth either 0, 1, or 2 points to control them if you conquer it from the other player. So that is the primary way that the shadow player is typically trying to earn a victory. The free people can also earn a military victory by conquering 4 points worth of shadow territories, and most of the shadow ones are worth 2, But as you might suspect, they are harder to get to and harder to take over for that player. I've seen it happen once. The other way is what you would expect. The Free People players trying to move Sam and Frodo all the way from Rivendell down into Mount Doom to where they can destroy the ring. And if they successfully move onto Mount Doom with Sam and Frodo, they win. And the clever thing with Sam and Frodo is you spend a die, you get to move them, but you don't physically move them on the map until certain things happen that reveal them, whether it's the Shadow player does something that causes them to be revealed, or the Free People player reveals them to maybe heal some of their corruption, because that's how the Shadow player wins, is by corrupting them. So every time they move, there's a chance that they might take some corruption from possessing that ring. When they get into Mordor, it's even more likely that that is going to accelerate a lot faster on that track, because if they get to 12 corruption, then Sam and Frodo have been corrupted, and, well, they don't go destroy the ring. Instead, they give it to Sauron or use it for their own purposes. Who knows? Write your own ending to that story. And so the balancing between having to possess a military might for both sides, whether you're trying to conquer or trying to play defense, along with the movement of the Fellowship and trying to slow down the movement of the Fellowship if you're on the Shadow side, and trying to corrupt them, versus trying to stay relatively uncorrupted if you're the Free People. That is the brilliance of this game. I've seen it take as little as half an hour. My wife has absolutely throttled me a couple of times in this, and it can take 3-4 hours to finish, and it's worth it every single time. I like throwing on the soundtrack and just immersing myself and feeling like I am playing out Lord of the Rings, and it does feel like you are playing Lord of the Rings. And that's the best way I can describe this. This is Lord of the Rings in a box. You are going to feel like you are doing the different things that you need to. You can send Gandalf to go and, rouse up the Ents. You can send Gimli up to rally the dwarves to the cause and send them off to fight. You can send Legolas to vie with the elves and get them all behind you. You can send hobbits riding with Gandalf. You can send Aragorn down to, or you can send, he's not Aragorn at the start of the game. He's Strider at the start of the game. You can send him into Minas Tirith to get crowned king and become Aragorn and to become even more valiant. You can send Boromir off to go and rally Minas Tirith. There's just so many wonderful layers to this game. Can't recommend it highly enough. That is War of the Ring. So there you go, friends. Sorry for the super long video. Thank you for watching. And I won't talk anymore because it's been long enough.